everybody is a superhero. And I always try to ask them first, if they have if they had a superpower, what would their superpower would be? Or if they were a superhero, what would their superhero name be? And it's interesting, to hear what they say. And, like last week I did a virtual reading at an elementary school in New York, and the kids they said very innocent things like, I want to save the world. I want to stop the wars. And
Wow.
I was just thinking, like, these are nobody was over the second grade. And I'm thinking, you want to say, stop the wars? Like, they're so in tune with what's going on. They understand a lot more than we give them credit for.
Yeah, that's
And
true.
so their hearts are open. Their little hearts are really open.
What's up, Hardly Typical Podcast family? This is your co-host Lamar here with Dr. Teresa Lee. We are excited today. Season 3, Dr. Lee. Season 3. Episode 3.
Yes.
Before we jump in though, Dr. Lee, I hadn't asked you this in the last couple episodes, so I don't want the people to get on me. But how are you and how are the Lee 3?
Listen, perfect time, right?
Right.
The third season, the third episode. I like it.
Yeah.
The Lead 3 are keeping me on my toes. We're getting through this cold and flu season. So everybody's coming home with a different something. And what they don't tell you about parenting, right? That's the hashtag. What they don't tell you about parenting is the lack of discretion that kids have. So, Mommy, look at this. Mommy, what is that? Mommy, this is itchy. Mommy, I sneeze. Look.
Yeah.
Whoa, we're doing a lot.
Why is this green? Why is this red?
I don't look what I just sneezed. It just came out of my nose.
Oh gosh.
I don't want to see that. I don't.
Yes.
So we are getting through cold and flu season with a hope and a prayer.
Okay. Well, the Lord be with you and make his face to shine upon you and
Give you grace.
give you grace and may you hide in the shadow of the Almighty away from
Amen. All of it. All
those cooties that they bring home. Because they will be sick and pass it off to you, and then they'll be better the next day, and then you sick for 2 weeks.
Yeah. Sneeze right in my face.
That part.
I feel fine, Mommy, and I'm down for a week.
Yeah. Yeah. So God bless you. God bless you. Well, listen, we got a special guest today, family. Today on the Hardly Typical Podcast, we have Carla Moultrie. Now, I always give a disclaimer that if it's a guest that I know, and so I actually met Carla through her husband, Nathaniel, and I met Nathaniel because he was a student at the time at my alma mater, Candler School of Theology, and I did a conference there, and then I came back and guest lectured a class there that was using one of my books, and I met Nathaniel there, and we kind of connected, and he invited me to his church to preach on their 4th anniversary, and that's where I met his wife, Carla. So welcome to the Hardly Typical Podcast, Carla. I want to start it off by letting you sort of tell the people who you are, a little bit about your background and what you do, and we'll get into your book a little bit later, which I found to be pretty awesome. And let me say this before you start, Carla. Can I just say my wife loves that bag you gave to her?
Thank you. I was in the store one day and I saw it and I didn't realize they were popular. So every time we have a guest at church, I figure if I like it, I grab me one. I said, if I like it, I'm sure other women will appreciate it. So I'm always grabbing them for every guest that we have.
Oh,
we do
love
let
me tell you. Yes, please.
I'm glad
every time she brings that bag out of the closet, she brags about it. I'm like, she's like, this is a nice bag. They gave me a nice bag. So just so you know, she loves that bag.
Great. I'm happy.
Yeah. But tell the people who you are and a little bit about your work, particularly like your work in our podcast is about disability, but also this season we're focusing on the Black church and the Black experience and Black spirituality. So kind of just give the listeners a little bit about your background and what you do.
Okay. Well, thank you again for having me. I'm excited to be here with you all this morning. I am Carla Moultrie. I'm married to Nathaniel Moultrie. He's pastor, senior pastor at White Oak Spring Missionary Baptist Church. Um, we have an 11-year-old daughter, Camille, who is was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder right before she turned 3.
Mm-hmm.
And
Can
it
I just
had.
say I love Camille? She is
I'm
the
sure she loves
sweetest.
you. She's a busy one. She keeps us
Yeah.
on our toes, and yeah, she does all of that. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, she was diagnosed right before she was turned 3 years old. And initially, I was like most parents that are get a diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder. I was shocked. I didn't know what to do. It was a lot to try to learn. But I took it and I saw a need for children, and I began for neurotypical children actually, to better understand what autism was and what it looked like for their peers. And I began to use my voice to advocate, for my daughter, the children like her, so that children who are not like her can better understand and support her.
Yeah.
Right now, I'm currently, this year, I just started serving my first year on the board of directors for Georgia United Cerebral Palsy. Um, it's a really amazing organization, just helping persons with cerebral palsy and other neurological disabilities, and just to help them as they grow, from children to youth to young adults, and to to be a voice for them to help support them in how they live, how them and their families live.
Wow. Incredible. Yeah. And so, listen, I so appreciate um, you and your family. When we came to visit your church, the hospitality. And when I say I love Camille, I mean it. Like she is such a bright spirit. Um,
Mhm.
I enjoyed being able to be around her, and of course your husband Nathaniel and I kind of connected, and we have a relationship. But I want to ask you this, just to kind of give a little bit more background. Tell us a little bit about, because before we got started recording, we were talking about where you're from, and I just assumed that you were from Georgia, and you let me know that you were not. So tell our listeners, where you grew up, what was your childhood like, and then because you're not from Georgia, like you're like me, you're a transplant. I'm interested in knowing what brought you to Georgia, right? That's always an interesting journey. I of course have my own story, but
Mhm.
what was growing up? What was young Carla like when she was
Okay,
growing up?
young Carla.
Yeah.
I'm from Lake Wells, Florida. I grew up in a household with 5 other siblings, 3 sisters and 2 brothers, with
Okay.
both my mom and my dad. Pentecostal family, Holy Ghost
Oh
Spirit
yeah.
family. So
That's you and Dr. Lee gonna get along fine.
that's how I grew up. I grew up in the
Yeah.
Church of God by Faith. I don't know if she's heard of that denomination. It's a smaller denomination, but I grew up in that denomination. Did everything typical that a church girl would do. I sang in the youth choir. Was on the youth usher board, and every fundraiser that the youth department did, I did. I led a lot of them. Um, I was very, very close to my family, very close to my church. So I didn't do a whole lot of extracurricular things. I was just really close to my family, my church. That was my normal life, but it was fun. I mean, having 5 of the siblings, it was always fun, always something to do. Then I went off to college in 1995 at Florida A&M University.
Okay.
I have a bachelor's,
FAMU.
FAMU. I
Yeah.
have a bachelor's in accounting. Stayed there in Tallahassee for a number of years because I got connected to Church of God in Christ there, Watson Temple Church of God in Christ, and just loved it. Loved it and
Okay.
stayed probably longer than I should have. But stayed there until honestly I met my husband. We met through mutual college friends. We didn't even know each other because he also went to Florida A&M, but we weren't there at the same time. We later met, and he decided that we needed to get married and I needed to leave Tallahassee. As he was preparing to go to seminary. So he said, I want you to come to New Jersey. And I had a demand. I'm not going anywhere unless my last name changes. So that was my thing. We got married and moved to New Jersey for him to go to seminary in 2010. And he went to Princeton Theological Seminary. We spent 5 years there serving in ministry. And then we relocated here to the Metro Atlanta area for ministry.
Okay.
And 2015, June of 2015, we made it here, and that was actually the year we started noticing challenges with Camille. She was around 21 months, and literally within the first month that we moved here is when we started noticing the changes in her, and he actually noticed it, and we eventually started the evaluation process, and eventually got a diagnosis.
Yeah, we're gonna definitely circle back around to that, but I'm one of these lowly Baptists who was raised Baptist.
There you go.
So I always mess with Dr. Lee that she's 10 times holier than I am.
You see this?
So that's why we had to partner together so that she can pray and I can do, the production.
Oh my goodness. Don't listen to him.
So since both of y'all are Pentecostal, I'm gonna step out of the way and let her kind of take over because I feel like I need to go tarry somewhere.
See.
Because I'm not as holy. I wasn't raised Pentecostal, so I miss all the holiness and all that stuff. Us Baptists, we kind of wretched. So
it's a remnant over in the Baptist church too.
It is. I missed it. But I'm glad I got two powerful Pentecostal sisters who can hold me up today.
We're gonna hold you up. We're gonna hold you up.
I appreciate
We're gonna hold you up.
It only takes one good Tarian service to get you
That's
right.
all. Just one.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it because I am a sinner. Let me tell you.
Oh Lord.
Help Jesus. Send your help.
Tell him stop. Tell him stop.
All right. So I'm gonna get out of the way and let Dr. Lee connect with you, and because I know she had some questions and some things that we want to have a conversation about.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, I know because I grew up similar, not a whole lot of extracurricular activities because my church kept me busy. Mm-hmm. So there was always something. And to be in the youth choir was a big deal.
Yeah.
So I know that's a journey. So in navigating that journey and finding your identity as a woman, as a Christian, as a person of faith, as you build that, but what people don't always recognize is also advocating for a child and becoming familiar with a disability is also a very similar journey.
It is.
It not only changes you, whether you have the disability or not, but it changes everybody around you. Mm-hmm. Everybody has to adjust. So what I want to talk about just for a minute is how that journey in ministry and that journey in advocacy complemented one another. Were there aspects of your journey as you developed as a woman and as a Christian that you were able to pull on during your journey of advocacy and vice versa?
Absolutely. My faith is really what helped me in the advocacy space. I remember for probably the first year after getting the diagnosis, I was really confused because autism is it's not always predictable. And I saw where my daughter had the ability to do certain things, but she didn't have the ability to do other things, or they were delayed. And that's where my faith kicked in. It really, really kicked in. And being a strong believer in faith, I mean, I was literally taught you can do anything. Like my parents really affirmed us, never made us think we were less than. Just you can do anything. So that kicked in with my daughter. I began to see how she needed someone to advocate for her until she's able to advocate for herself. And so I really, I went really, really hard for her. And then I began to see other children just like her. And I noticed it more. And I think, a lot of times we've known people who have a disability, in this case, autism. We've known people, but we didn't really understand it. And for me, um, it caused me to seek better understanding of, persons with this, with autism. And for me, I saw children who didn't understand autism. So I said, if my child is having struggles and these other children are having struggles and these kids who are not autistic, they may have struggles, understanding them. So, in the faith space, I said, I told my husband, I began talking to him about it, and I said, we need to do more. We really need to do more, and we need to, how does this look for her? Because she's going to grow up to be an adult with autism. So, I really, really just, it came almost natural to me. I believe that she could do anything. I believe other children like her could do anything. And they just needed the support. They needed someone to support and advocate on their behalf. And I just began to do it. And to me, it was just like any other thing growing up in church. When I was a child, and naturally, if I saw a need, I just did it. With 5 other siblings, you kind of learn how to share. You learn how to do, it's not always about you. It's about other people. It's about serving other people. When we have other siblings, you learn to serve other people in your house, and you're not always first.
Right.
And so that's kind of how I saw with, a child with autism. And my child, I needed to be her voice. I needed to be the voice for other kids, to help other parents, in particular, understand that it's okay. Your child is just as good as they are enough. And you don't have to feel indifferent about your child, and that we're going to get through this. So I naturally saw a need, and I just jumped in, and I began to try to fill the need.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you're speaking to the fact that not only are parents seeking understanding, but there are some kids who are like, wait, what is this? I don't understand. Can she play with me?
Yeah.
Well, she's playing differently. Well, and you providing that, because I have seen that where kids aren't immediately indifferent. If anything, they're like, well, I want to play with her. Why isn't she talking to me? Or why isn't she making eye contact? So kids are seeking that understanding just as much as adults. And it's great that there's somebody out there providing that information, as opposed to, oh, she's different, just go play with somebody else. Or no, she doesn't do that. She doesn't play like you guys play. So play with somebody else. Cause I've seen that too.
Yeah.
Exactly why I wrote my children's book. That exactly. I mean, my little cousins, when we would come together for Christmas or Thanksgiving, they were, her age, and they observed. They said, well, Camille won't share her toys with us. She would always come in with a bag of toys and her iPad, and they wanted to sit and watch whatever she's watching on her iPad or want to play with her and engage her. And they literally said those words: Camille won't play with us. Why won't Camille talk to us? Or she had her own snacks, because she wouldn't eat everything everybody else ate. Well, she won't share her snacks with us. Well, I remember we had one event where, they had all this food, and we ordered pizza. And, and I knew that a bunch of other little kids, they're not going to want the green beans and potato salad and the fried chicken. If we come in here with pizza for Camille, they're going to want pizza. So I asked all the parents, I was like, do y'all mind if I order a couple extra pizzas? And they were like, well, we got food. And I'm like, well, Camille's not going to eat that. So they were like, okay. And the kids were really happy. So, I try to, create spaces where she can do the same thing that they do, and they begin to understand each other. And that was, like I said, that was the purpose of the book, just so the other kids who are not like her can better understand, the challenges that she has.
Definitely. Well, listen, you brought it up now. So since you brought it up, I must insist. Tell us a little bit more about the book. What's the name of it? Where can we find it?
The name of the book is Awesome Girl.
Awesome
very
Girl.
similar. It's a superhero. Very similar to how Clark Kent is Superman. Well, Camille Moultrie is Awesome Girl. We talk about her as a child and as a person. And then we talk about some of the challenges that kids have who are autistic. And then we talk about their strengths, which in the book we call her superpowers. Because oftentimes, with an autism diagnosis, a lot of times we tend to focus on the challenges a lot. Well, they can't do this, or they don't do that, or they don't do this or that. But we don't often focus on the strengths or things that we see as things that we see as strengths, we don't highlight those things. A lot of persons with autism are highly intellectual. I mean, they have very good memory, or the different things about them that are their strengths that often get ignored and looked over because of the diagnosis. And they get classified as, oh, this, but when they really have a lot of strengths. We know people now are going to college, getting degrees,
Absolutely,
doing major things
yeah.
that have an autism diagnosis. So it doesn't limit them because they're autistic, and we want other kids to know that persons with autism have strengths just like anybody else. And the book right now, it's going to be on my website, awesomegirl.com. Also, you can find it on Amazon, barnesandnobles.com, walmart.com, and booksamillion.com. Pretty much anywhere books are sold, you'll be able to find it.
Yes. That's a tremendous blessing. And let me make sure we point out, it's Ausome AU, not
AU,
Ausome AW.
AU, AU,
AU. So
SOME.
we'll make sure to our Hardly Typical community that we put that in our comments, and we post that on our social media platforms. So make sure you're following us, make sure you're subscribing, because we want to make sure you get access to this amazing resource.
Yeah. Can I jump in, Dr. Lee?
Hey, jump in.
You know what I so appreciate, and this is something that I quite honestly have never really thought about, Carla, and that is how we teach other kids about, neurotypical kids or kids who are able-bodied about uh, autism or other disabilities. Because, on this show, we talk a lot about, um, disabilities. We talk about faith. We talk about church. And a lot of times, we include talking about our kids with the diagnosis, our adults with the diagnosis. But I never actually really thought about who is teaching their peers about how to appreciate and interact. Because, I've done, and Dr. Lee, and you probably as well, I know, Carla, you're also a speaker, done lectures or conferences or been at churches and taught people. And I can honestly say, I don't know that I have ever seen, and of course, this probably maybe happening somewhere, but I have never heard of or seen like a kids gathering or conference, or how we do things for our kids
Good point.
in church, right?
Yeah.
But I've never heard of like a workshop or a lesson on teaching the kids. We teach adults how to prepare. We teach adults how to create space. But one thing that you said, Carla, is teaching her cousins and creating space where they can do things together. So I wanted to ask you, like, what are some of the maybe tips or some of the things that you learned over the years that have been helpful in teaching her peers how to interact with Camille? What are some of the things that you share with? And maybe some of that may be in the book. We don't want to give it all away because we want people to buy it. But like, I find that very interesting, honestly, because I've never seen that. I have never seen a kids gathering at a church that sits the kids down and teaches them. We teach adults all the time, but we very rarely teach kids. So, what are some of the things that you have tried to teach her cousins or other children that are her peers in ways that they can interact and share space with Camille?
Well, the first thing I understood when I thought about writing the book was that children are very innocent. Especially the younger they are, the more innocent they are, and they just have questions. Well, why? And they don't mean any harm. They just don't know. And one of the blessings that has happened is that when I wrote the book, I didn't expect it to get as much attention as it has gotten. But school districts literally across the country have reached out to me to do virtual readings to the kids. And they are so excited to learn about Awesome Girl. And one of the things I do, I try to empower the students. I remind them that everybody is amazing. Everybody is a superhero. And I always try to ask them first, if they have if they had a superpower, what would their superpower would be? Or if they were a superhero, what would their superhero name be? And it's interesting, to hear what they say. And, like last week I did a virtual reading at an elementary school in New York, and the kids said, they said very innocent things like, I want to save the world. I want to stop the wars. And
Wow.
I was just thinking like, these are, nobody was over the second grade. And I'm thinking, you want to say, stop the wars? Like, they're so in tune with what's going on. They understand a lot more than we give them credit for.
Yeah, that's
And
true.
so their hearts are open. Their little hearts are really open. And when I began to share with them about, the difficulties that Awesome Girl sometimes has, that sometimes she gets frustrated or she covers her ears when it's too loud. They always ask, well, how can I help Awesome Girl? Can I be her friend? They want to help solve the problem. They don't want her to have anxiety. They don't want her to be overwhelmed, or, they want to help her eat more vegetables. And, it's amazing. I honestly believe the Lord just allowed me to put this together so it can help open their minds and help open their understanding to want to help. Because one thing I know is that my child is a child with disabilities, and she will become an adult with disabilities, with a disability. So that means her peers will grow up with her, and some of them will work as RBTs. Some of them will work as doctors and nurses, and they will service people just like her. And I believe that if we begin to teach empathy and compassion and inclusion now to these preschoolers, elementary school age kids, we literally can change the entire world. I really believe
Absolutely.
that. And I believe that that's what's happening, the transformation just in that. And and they want to wear a cape just like her. They want that. They tell me they want the outfit. They want it all. And it's so amazing to hear them say, because they're just looking at a picture and they're just fascinated, especially in a context where, there are a lot of Black and brown kids. She looks just like them. So, that's for me. That's how I've been able to communicate to teachers and, the students. And I've literally had administrators from around the country, ask me to do engagement sessions with their kids. And even some of their staff, because they didn't understand a lot about, while they have a lot of theory around autism, they don't have a lot of practical knowledge, about autism. And
Yeah.
I'm seeing that more and more. So, yeah, I'm creating engagement sessions with elementary schools. Churches have asked me to come and speak and share about, my journey and how they can be more inclusive and how they can create more inclusive spaces. So it's really been a blessing, really. And I just see that, and there's such an interest now. So many people really want to really know and understand how they can better service that community, the persons with disabilities space.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
That
awesome.
that's good. I really appreciate that. And be honest with you, I'm going to be thinking a lot about that because um I just have never seen it. I think, one of the things I was taught, and they may have taught this to y'all in school too, when I was doing my doctorate and getting ready to do the dissertation, one of the things that they said is to find a gap in knowledge and fill it, or
Mm-hmm.
find, a space where um either no it's either it appears like no one's talking about it or not enough people are talking about it. And I have to say that I am super impressed. But also it's got the wheels thinking like, how can we follow your lead? Because we teach a lot of adults,
Mm-hmm.
but how much better would a child with autism or any other disability, how much better would their experience be if we also prepared children and taught
Mm-hmm.
them, and
Definitely.
like you said, taught them empathy and compassion and understanding. And we do this all the time in conferences with adults, but I have never heard of a Sunday school lesson about how to treat your peers who are different, or a
Mm-hmm.
conference. We have all these children's conferences. Yeah, so I'm really thinking a lot. You've made me think a lot. I think, Dr. Lee, maybe this is another area that we probably need to explore even on our podcast in the future. Like
Absolutely.
that has really got me thinking about how much better um, children with autism or disabilities, how much better their experience could be. Because we spend a lot of time I've always said this, we spend a lot of time putting most of the responsibility on the child or the adult or the family that's impacted by disability, and training them and teaching them, through all the therapies, and all that's great. But that's designed to help them kind of fit into the world. And
Yeah.
we do less about trying to teach the world how to create spaces for our children and our families. So yeah, that really has me thinking, like you said, they're going to grow up together. So what better way to start changing the world and creating a more inclusive world by starting with our children? Yeah.
And their hearts are open.
Yes.
That's the beautiful thing. They are, because I mean, the innocence of a first grader, unfortunately, they haven't been corrupted, a lot of them, with the world and the negative things about the world, and how some people can be ugly, how they treat people with disabilities. They're innocent. So, I mean, and I will say this generation, the younger generation, they're more empathetic. It just seems, in my opinion, they're more empathetic. They're more open to people with differences. And that's a blessing. And I really feel like, this is such a divine time to be talking about this and doing this, because these young people are really open, and they want to help support and, help people with autism. I mean, they literally tell me, can I be her friend? Can I be her best friend? And
That's
if I
so
take
nice.
her to, to some of the readings, the kids, I mean, the only thing that the funny thing is, she doesn't always engage. She might engage with one child, and she doesn't like a whole, team of kids coming around her, but they're fascinated because they see the little girl from the book, and, she's a little celebrity to them.
Yeah.
And she might want to engage with one. She don't want to engage with five.
Uh-huh.
So, that's the funny part. But they are really, their hearts are open, their minds are open, and they understand a lot more than we think.
Yeah.
They really do.
Wow. So good.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So good.
I think when it's a part of your family, those lessons kind of come whether you want them to or not. So you have to have those discussions about difference and what a typical family can do without any effort. It's going to take us a couple of days to prepare for.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So it almost seems like some of those lessons come in the most unusual places and at the unusual times. And you look back and you're like, wow, okay, I see that now. I see where God's hand was. I see where I could learn more of patience and kindness, or I see how she now has shown me something. So tell me, in this journey of having a child with a disability, what has been one of the greatest lessons you've learned?
Literally one of the greatest lessons that I've learned is patience. Really patience. I had to learn to see things through her eyes. A person with a disability, they have different challenges and struggles. And I remember when she was 3, we had signed, because she used to tumble and literally can flip and land on her feet. I mean, we were like, oh, we got the next Dominique Dawes. We were all excited.
There you go. Uh-huh.
And we signed her up for gymnastics, and I remember my husband and I took her to the first session, and she just didn't have the ability to follow the instructions like the other kids, but she could tumble and flip better than some of the other kids that were more advanced.
Yeah.
And I remember, the instructor told us that, we would have to find a different class for her. She said, well, we have another class that's going to be starting in the next couple of weeks for beginners. She should probably come to that class. And I was all upset. I remember thinking, no, she's going to come. She's going to stay right here. We paid for her to be here. I want her here. My husband was like, we'll come back. And, I really, cause I could see that she had the capacity to do it, but I had to understand that it would look different for her. I had to, be okay with knowing that she's capable, but it just may look different for her. And, I had to learn to see things through her eyes, because literally one of the things that I've understood and came to find out is that, persons with autism, typically, can do a lot of things that, neurotypical people can do, but it just looks different. So I had to be okay with that. I had to be patient with her and see things through her eyes and provide her the support that she needed. I mean, we couldn't do everything the way I wanted it. I had to help her do things that she wanted to do, and in the way it needed to work for her. Just patience and empathy. I never would have thought that I would have had a child with autism, but I have so much grace for, any person with a disability now. I'm always trying to figure out ways to help them. And that's one of the things, that's an area that I know I've grown in, just in patience and empathy. And, I'm just always just trying to support that parent and that family that may need, that extra level of support, and trying to provide it however I can do it.
Yeah.
I like it.
I love how you said you learned to not just see the world through her eyes, but want to see the world through her eyes. Um, which honestly, I think that's probably a low key lost um, value and characteristic of being a Christ follower, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the reason I say that is, if you think about, like, if we kind of switch gears and talk about faith, and then I want to get into specifically the Black church, especially as you as a first lady. But before we get to that, I want to sort of, put this out there for the listeners and maybe even get your input. You said you wanted to see the world through her eyes. And for me, that just sparked one of my favorite discussions. And I talk about it in some of the things that I've done lectures. And that is something that oftentimes is called incarnational ministry, right? Sort of the pattern of what God does in becoming human, right? But in a lot of ways, I think that's one of the core tenets of our Christian faith, is that we have a God who wants to see the world, or wanted to see the world through human eyes. And what is it like to be human? What is it like to experience suffering? What is it like to experience the struggle? And so I love the fact that the intention is always to try to see the world through someone else's eyes, to see the world through the eyes of someone with a disability, to see the world through the eyes of Camille. And to me, that is probably the closest pattern of being a Jesus follower that we can have, is to try to put ourselves in the position to see the world through someone else's eyes. So I so appreciate that. I don't know if you had some thoughts about that before we kind of transition into talking about the Black church, but yeah, I just think that's a good lesson for our listeners. It's a good lesson for me to be reminded that that's what God does, is that he becomes one of us so that he could see the world.
That's exactly what he does.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, that is exactly what he does. And if we say we're Christians and we're followers of Christ, we want to be like him in every way possible. And that's even through, the least of these, really reaching out to them and showing them that love and compassion that Christ would.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, let's transition a little bit to the Black church. As a first lady, now, typically, that is a position that is held in high esteem. It is a sophisticated position. It is a position with class. It is a position with dignity. It is a position of representation. There is an ideology of pristine presentation that comes with the first lady, right? And I think we both know that sometimes disabilities and different abilities don't always present in a pristine manner. Tell us, how has being a first lady and an advocate and a mother, how have those two worked well for you? But also, have there been some challenges specifically to being a first lady and having a child with a disability?
Well, it's worked for me. Well, I'll say how. Yeah, I'll start off with how it's worked for me. I never thought that people would be. I never realized that when I decided to share and open up about my own experience and my child's experience, I didn't realize how much people watched and people from social media, because I'm very transparent on social media. When I decided to share, I became extremely transparent. I couldn't take anything back. I couldn't walk it back. It's out there. And people received it so much. I mean, I literally every week I have someone from my life, from either when I grew up in Florida, from when I was in college in Tallahassee, from when we lived in New Jersey, to even now. Every week, someone is reaching out to me and saying, "Hey, we just got a diagnosis. My cousin's sister's son, somebody's child has just been diagnosed, or my child has just gotten diagnosed. My grandchild has been recently diagnosed. You know, can you pray for us? Or what did you do? Or um, I mean, people are so open. And because I grew up in a faith community in church and growing up in church is from a child up into college. And I mean, I've been in church all my life. It always goes back to that. It always goes back to that. And I often think about how I was raised and how God prepared me for this space. Not the traditional first lady, with the big hats, because I don't wear the big hats and the rhinestone suit.
Okay.
Not that there's anything wrong with it, but I'm not that first lady.
Okay.
So I feel like the Lord really, prepared me, just, and how I was raised to be empathetic and to be supportive of other people and always looking to help other people. It prepared me for this space. So now
Okay.
me being a mom, an advocate for, children and parents with disability that are caring for persons with disabilities, people come to me all the time. I mean, even when we got to, the previous church we were at and our current church, members, I mean, have come up to me. I have a grandson who's autistic, or I remember when we first got to our current church, one of the deacons told me about his grandson. He's a young adult that has autism, and then another deacon told me about his grandson. I mean, his son is autistic, and it just over the years they were never really received and I remember one young lady. She's now a pastor's wife. She came to me and she said, what can I do to help, kids with autism? What can I do, if, because I'm sure her husband, she left our church because her husband used to begin pastoring a church. And she said, I'm sure we'll get members with kids with disabilities. What can I do? I mean, just her honesty,
Yeah, that's really
wanting
good.
to be proactive about helping other kids with disabilities. And I remember her telling me she grew up in our current church. And she said, I remember a pastor that we had 20 something years ago, if somebody was with autism or something came in, because, it wasn't really talked about as much as it is now then, 20 years ago. She said, I remember someone a child made a noise and he told them to take that child out. They were disrupting the service 20 something years ago. And, I absolutely would not. I mean, that's not allowed in our church. We are not isolating anyone. And but that happened. I mean, I wasn't there, but she shared with me that happened, and how did she genuinely wanted to know how she could support um support kids and families with a disability and with autism. And to me, that's how it has helped me, just my transparency and just being open about it. People they come to me all the time. One of our ushers came to me and said she's so glad that, we were going to start doing something at the church for the kids. And, she said, my grandson, the noise sometimes is too much for him. It might be too much. And, so thank you, and she was like almost in tears. I mean, literally like just full. And, it made her 4-year-old grandson was now being thought about, and her daughter, who doesn't come to church because there's not a space created, and that happens in a lot of Black churches, the space just isn't created for persons with disability. They're completely isolated, so they stay home. A lot of them, they stay home because there's not been a space carved out for their young people. So that's how it's helped me, just being open and sharing, and I'm always happy to share. I mean, had one of our other members coming to me recently. She told me her granddaughter was just diagnosed, and she was like, "Can I, can I get a book? I want to help my son and his daughter understand their daughter a little bit better, and how they can help, and how we as a family can help her. And it's been a blessing to me. How it hasn't, I think your question was how it hasn't helped. I think everybody doesn't always want it. Everybody doesn't always want to understand. And I think that's the challenge, getting people to see that and understand that it's important and that it's needed. Because I mean, just if you just think about it, there are so many people, when you look at the CDC, the stats about how many families, how many kids are diagnosed regularly with autism, and how many people, adults that live with autism. If we created more spaces for these people, we could pack some of our churches. I mean,
absolutely,
that would even solve some of this membership gap. Some people literally stay home because there's not, a space for their children. So, getting people in congregations to understand the need. But I think we're getting there. I think people really want to know and understand more and more now.
Yeah. I so appreciate when I experience that sort of inclusion and welcome in Black church spaces. As I said earlier, this season, we always talk about Black spirituality and the Black church, and our sort of tagline for this podcast is intersections and insights, right? So we like to talk about how all these things intersect. But I'm always particularly happy and filled with joy when the Black church space is inclusive, because, like you said, there's a lot of times where that's not been talked about. And so one of the things that I'll say is that I appreciate it in being able to visit is Camille at your church, and I'm sure this has a lot to do with the culture that both you and your husband and others are creating. She was very much allowed to be herself. No one gave side eye. Because I remember, throughout the whole service, she was allowed to be herself. She made noise. She did her thing. She watched her tablet with her headphones on. Even when I was preaching, she was doing her thing. And I would tell people all the time, I was diagnosed and I was 36, and obviously I want people to know that everybody is different. But I always share with people, and trying to create inclusion in the churches I pastor, is that if it doesn't bother me, don't let it bother you, which is pretty much everything. Is you can do it. Like, once I start talking, preaching, I'm like the child who has a special interest in trains, and once they get going, you're not going to stop them. So once I get to talking about the Bible, you're not going to stop me anyway, because that's just a part of my neurology as well. But I loved, Carla, how Camille was very much free to be herself. And at least to my knowledge, I didn't see anybody give side eye or try to hush or try to say she was not allowed to be in the sanctuary because she was making noise. It's like, no, this is her church too, and she's allowed to be herself. And so that, to me, is a testament, as someone who's been to your church, who's participated in worship with you and saw sort of the inner workings. It's a testament to what you all have done and what you are creating. And so I'm so appreciative of being able to see that in the Black church. And that's something that is so needed. And it made me feel at home, I think it even made me preach a little bit better. I'm just joking, but I'm not. It did make me feel more comfortable too, as someone who doesn't um, have the exact same challenges as Camille, as someone who's autistic, but someone who can identify with, with her, and knowing that she was safe there, it made me feel safe. And so I'm joking that it made me preach a little bit better, but I'm not joking. I felt safe. I felt safe enough to be myself as well. So that's a testament to what you all have done. And so, we just want to replicate that as much as we can, and the Black church experience. So, we're getting ready to wrap up here, because I know you're a very busy woman. But where can people, we talked about the book, um, but I do want to say again, um, for you to share where people can find the book, the title of the book. I have that one, and it I'm not sure. Like, did we get two books from you, or did you have two separate? One's a coloring book, right?
We have a
Yeah.
coloring book as well, an activity and coloring book, and we translated it in Spanish as well.
Wow.
Yeah, we there's a great need in the Hispanic and Latino community. A lot of children. I mean, we know now that a lot of them are, being pushed away, but a lot of parents were. We've done research. They've been afraid to go to the doctors and get evaluations for fear, and a lot of their children go undiagnosed, and so we said let's get this in Spanish too, so children who speak Spanish may have peers, siblings that live with autism spectrum disorder, and they can better understand. I remember being a blessing to me. I did a presentation at work, and I always seem to just bring up autism. I guess that's because that's my life. And after I did the presentation, one of my colleagues, who was a Spanish speaking gentleman, called me. He said, "Carla, do you mind if I ask you a question?" And I said, "Sure." He said, "I didn't know your daughter was autistic. My wife and I just found out my son is autistic, and we don't know what to do. We're completely overwhelmed." And we had an hour-long conversation about, just autism, and he was so appreciative. And I said, "Can I please see you a copy of my Spanish version?" And he was like, "Please do." And he went online talking about it on LinkedIn, talking about how his coworker wrote this amazing book, and he's beginning to share his journey, because a lot of men, if they're not diagnosed, they don't understand, and they don't typically relate the same way that women do. Women, we're nurturers, and we do all of that, but a lot of men, fathers, sometimes struggle with the diagnosis. So it was very helpful to him, and I was grateful for that, to see that. That's the goal. The book is Awesome Girl, AUSOME Girl. You can find it on our website, awesomegirl.com, or you can get it at amazon.com, barnesandnobles.com, walmart.com, booksamillion.com. Pretty much anywhere books are sold, you can get a copy of Awesome Girl.
Yeah. Awesome. So where can people find you? Are you on social media? Where can, if people want to connect with you or follow up with you? I know a lot of times people want to, inbox you or DM and say, "Listen, I listened to the episode and I want to know about this, or I want to know about that, or how can we get you to read to our school or come speak at our church?" So how can people connect with you in that way?
I'm on Instagram as Carla A. Moultrie, Carla A. Moultrie, and that's Moultrie. And I'm also on Facebook as Carla A. Moultrie. On Twitter, I think I'm X. It's not Twitter anymore. I think I'm Mrs. Carla Moultrie. I think I don't really use X a whole lot, but Instagram and Facebook. If you DM me, I'm happy to help any way I can. That we want to get the message out. We want to help children better understand autism, and adults as well. If they don't understand, it's a very great resource to begin to understand what autism is
And
and
I
what
can
it can look
attest to
like.
that. I can attest to that because I have a copy and the coloring book. Haven't started coloring yet, but at some point I'm going to sit down and relax and do some coloring. But definitely to our listeners, our subscribers, definitely support this work, especially if you are a person of color. One of the things that I loved to see is a book that featured a young Black girl. And, like you said, there's oftentimes there's not a lot of resources for us, but there's not a lot of resources that are written by us. And so what you're doing is super important. And so we appreciate it. Any last words, Dr. Lee, before we close out?
This has been awesome. I'm looking forward to getting the coloring book and the book for my Lee 3. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah. So listen, Hardly Typical Podcast family, remember, we are not just building a podcast. We're trying to build a community. So go on to our Facebook page, our Instagram, our Substack. Let us know what you think. Leave some messages or some encouragement for Carla, or maybe even reach out to her directly. Bring her to your church. Have her read to your children's group, libraries, schools, churches. Make sure that you get in touch with her, especially if you're in the Black church context. She is doing a great job in helping, again, children understand how they can be more inclusive. And I think that's a great work. And there's a huge gap that needs to be filled. And I'm so glad that you're filling that gap for us, Carla. So Hardly Typical Podcast family, remember, like, subscribe, share. We're on every platform, major podcast platform. And we thank you again for joining us for another episode of the Hardly Typical Podcast. And we will see you next episode.